In a private notebook he never intended anyone to read, Marcus Aurelius thanked the gods for exactly one thing about his children: that they were not stupid, that they were not deformed. He filled that notebook with thousands of lines about duty, about ruling your own mind before you try to rule anything else, about staying steady when the world gives you every reason not to. He had one son who lived to adulthood. Cassius Dio was alive to watch what came next. He wrote that this son was a greater curse to Rome than any plague, any war, any crime in its history. That with him, Roman history stopped being a kingdom of gold and became one of iron and rust. For 19 years, the most disciplined mind ever handed absolute power governed exactly the way his philosophy told him to. Then he made the one decision his philosophy never taught him how to make. He did what every father does. That's what this episode is about. For as long as anyone in the ancient world had thought seriously about government, one problem kept surfacing. Good laws don't enforce themselves. Someone has to interpret them, apply them, decide the hard cases, and that someone is a human being, with appetites, fears, grudges, a taste for flattery. Every system, however carefully built, runs through a person in the end. 500 years before Rome had an emperor at all, a philosopher in Athens proposed the obvious, radical fix. Stop trying to build a perfect system around imperfect rulers. Build a perfect ruler. Until philosophers rule as kings, or those we now call kings and rulers genuinely philosophize, cities will have no rest from evil. He tried to build one himself, 3 times in Syracuse. He failed every time. The tyrant he had personally tutored sold him into slavery. Five centuries later, in Rome, a boy started the same experiment again. Not in a dialogue, in a palace. 7th March 161, Rome. An old man is dying. The boy he raised for this exact moment is standing beside the bed.
His name at that point was still Marcus Annius Verus. He had been groomed for the throne since he was 17, 23 years of tutors, Stoic philosophy, administrative apprenticeship under the Emperor Antoninus Pius, who had adopted him as a son and let him carry real responsibility long before he had to rule. On the 7th of March, Antoninus died. The Senate confirmed Marcus as emperor within hours. He accepted on one condition. His adoptive brother, Lucius Verus, would rule beside him as full co-emperor, equal in name and law. No Roman had ever shared the position that completely. Marcus had spent 2 decades being taught that the point was not to want power. He was demonstrating the lesson before he had governed for a single day. That autumn, Parthia invaded Armenia. There was no honeymoon. That same year, in a town south of Rome, his wife Faustina gave birth to twin sons. One died as an infant, the other survived. His name was Commodus. The philosopher-king's education had just been finished. His sons had just begun.
The philosophy Marcus practiced daily comes down to one move. Sort everything that happens into two piles. What is up to you, your own judgments, your choices, how you respond. What is not up to you, your health, your reputation, other people, fortune, war. Confuse the two, the Stoics argued, and you suffer. Parthia invading is not up to you. Letting it wreck your judgment is. Practiced seriously, this is close to invincible. A man who has stopped needing the world's cooperation cannot be blackmailed, terrified, or broken the way an ordinary man can. For years, under real pressure, it worked. Here is what the doctrine had already told him, plainly, if he wanted to hear it. Other people are not up to you, not their choices, not their character, not what they become, not even your own sons. Marcus had read this 1,000 times. He believed it completely. That belief was about to meet the one test capable of breaking it. He had 2 projects running that decade on the Danube, his own character and his son's. Only one of them was still up to him.
From 166 onward, Marcus spent most of his reigns somewhere other than Rome. The Marcomanni and the Quadi broke across the Danube frontier. The Antonine Plague, brought back by legions returning from the Parthian War, killed millions across the empire, Romans and provincials both. Marcus commanded from military camps for years at a stretch, negotiating with tribal chiefs one campaign season and burying soldiers the next. At night, in the tent, he wrote to himself, not for readers, not for the historical record, notes on how to hold his judgment steady the next morning and the morning after that. The notebook survived by accident. We call it Meditations. He never gave it a title. Commodus grew up largely on that frontier. He was given the title Caesar at the age of 5. By his early teens, he was accompanying his father on campaign, present at councils of war, present at the emperor's own discipline and practice, not in theory. He was left-handed and proud of it. The soldiers said he never missed with a javelin or a bow. If virtue could be transmitted by exposure to a living example, Commodus had more exposure to one than any child in the empire.
In 175, Marcus got the test no philosopher chooses for himself. A trusted general in the East, Avidius Cassius, heard a false rumor that Marcus had died of the plague. He declared himself emperor. Legions in Syria and Egypt backed him. Here is what the philosophy demanded of Marcus in that moment. No panic, no fear for his own position. Judgment held separate from the threat to it. Cassius was assassinated by his own officers before the 2 armies ever met. The crisis lasted weeks, not years. He ordered Cassius's private correspondence burned unread. He did not want the temptation of revenge. He wrote to the Senate asking for clemency toward Cassius's family and supporters. His own wife, Faustina, had pressed him in writing to be severe. He answered her, "Nothing recommends a ruler to the world's love more than mercy." He could control his own answer to her. He could not control what their 14-year-old son, watching all of it happen, took away from either side of that argument. The theory had just survived its hardest live test inside the one mind it could actually control. 2 years after that mercy, Marcus made his son co-emperor, full imperial power. He was 16.
In 77, Commodus was raised to co-Augustus, the same rank Marcus had once shared with Lucius Verus, granted an age no one before him had received it. There was no apprenticeship period, no provincial governorship first, no mire command to prove himself in, the way Marcus himself had spent 20 years being tested before he ruled anything. The son inherited the destination without repeating the road. By 178 at 17, Commodus was nominally leading legions against the Quadi and the Marcomanni, the same enemy his father had spent 12 years failing to entirely subdue. Every adoptive emperor before Marcus, Nerva, Trajan, Hadrian, Antoninus, had faced this exact decision and chosen differently. None of them had a surviving son. Each had chosen his successor from the whole empire for demonstrated competence, not blood. Marcus was the first in 4 generations who didn't have to make that choice. By 177, he had already buried most of his children. Faustina had borne him at least 13. 5 survived past childhood. Only 1 was a son. He made it anyway. He had a living son. He gave him everything.
Marcus knew the doctrine. He had known it for 40 years. Other people's characters are not up to you, not even your son's. You cannot make him virtuous by wanting it, or by modeling it, or by putting him where he can watch you do it. In 177, he made Commodus co-emperor anyway. 16 years old, full power, no trial period, the one thing 4 generations of his predecessors had always required, and he had just decided his son didn't need. Not because he'd forgotten what he believed. He had spent a lifetime training himself not to need any particular outcome from the world. There is a kinder reading of what came next. A passed-over son doesn't stay loyal. He becomes a rival, and a rival with royal blood is a civil war waiting for a reason. Choosing Commodus may not have been ambition. It may have been the only path that didn't end in bloodshed. Maybe. Either way, it was the largest bet on a single outcome he ever placed. He wrote about the plague. He wrote about betrayal, about the deaths of friends, about his own anger and how to master it. He never wrote about this, not once in 12 books. He could correct his own judgment every night in a tent in his own handwriting for as long as he lived. He could not correct his sons after March 17th, 180. 17 March 180. Vindobona on the Danube frontier. The emperor is dying of illness in camp in the middle of a war that has lasted most of his reign.
Marcus died in camp, still on campaign, the war against the Danube tribes still unfinished after 13 years and a plague that had already killed millions. Commodus, 18, was with him. Marcus had been within reach of finishing what he started, 2 new Roman provinces carved out of the conquered territory, a frontier pushed north for a generation. A medallion struck in his own lifetime already called him and his son propagatoribus imperii, those who expanded the empire. Within weeks, Commodus abandoned the plan, made peace with the tribes his father had spent 13 years refusing to let win, and returned to Rome. He did not campaign again. He was 18 years old. He had been trained by the most disciplined man in the empire, present at his side for most of his life. He had also never once had to struggle or prove himself or lose.
Marcus Aurelius did not fail the test Plato set 500 years earlier. He passed it. Through plague, betrayal, and 19 years of a war he never chose, the philosopher-king existed for one lifetime, in one body, exactly as promised. What the theory never had was an answer for the day after.
161. Marcus becomes emperor, insists on sharing power. War begins within the year. His son is born the same year. 166. The plague, millions dead across the empire. 175. Avidius Cassius revolts. Marcus burns his letters unread, asks the Senate for mercy. 177. Commodus, co-emperor, 16 years old, no apprenticeship. 4 generations of choosing the best candidate broken. 180. Marcus dies in camp, mid-war. Commodus makes peace within weeks, returns to Rome, never campaigns again. 192. Commodus renames Rome after himself, fights as a gladiator in the arena in front of the Senate. New Year's Eve, 192, his wrestling partner strangles him in his bath. Marcus kept a private notebook for most of his adult life. On its very first page, written years before any of this, thanking the gods for what he had been given, there is one line about his children: that they were not stupid, that they were not deformed. He never went back and crossed it out.
Next, the philosopher who mapped how power watches, controls, and disciplines everyone but itself. He spent his life describing the mechanism. Then he died inside one.